The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, the Labour opposition will support this bill through its second reading, but we are giving notice that at the committee stages there is a part of the bill, Part 3, which we will be vigorously opposing. There's been, I think, quite a lot of discussion amongst members on this, and this bill is, I think, a mixture. Part 1, I think, is generally very well supported and might be regarded as good legislation. Part 2, I think, there's a feeling of ambivalence on this side of the House, and maybe a variety of views. But Part 3 is an area which we are opposed to because of the loss of autonomy on the part that is currently enjoyed by the Charities Commission when it goes to effectively being a board subject to being run out of and through DIA. Mr Speaker, we won't speak much at this stage of the bill on the ongoing question of the mess that's been made of state sector restructuring by this government. I think it's a little bit unfair to blame Jonathan Coleman for the mess that Tony Ryle has made, for the extra work that Murray McCully has caused the State Services Commission, and I think it's probably important, therefore, to focus on this legislation. There is a review of the Charities Act, which is due to take place, the Charities Act 2005, which is due to take place on the completion of the current review of the Incorporated Societies Act 1908, and I think most of us would accept a review of a 1908 Act probably has some priority over the 2005 Act. But what the government has decided to do is to anticipate the results of that review by transferring functions to the Department of Internal Affairs, and members on this side of the House think that is a premature thing to do. We think currently there is a robust agency, normally resilient, and Mr Speaker, we think it generally gets its decisions right, although I'm one of the people who knows that every now and again there have been some decisions that have been made that wouldn't exactly cover the Charities Commission in glory. I think one which has been quoted to me has to do with the Anglican Church apparently not allowed to be registered as a charity, and the reason was a lack of a wind-up clause in the church's constitution, and apparently that was a requirement of some of the bureaucrats at the. Well, I suppose it would be possible to have one might say sort of like a second coming clause as part of the wind-up, but I think, Mr Speaker, that would be a taking bureaucracy, or that was taking bureaucracy on the part of the Charities Commission too far. I think, and there certainly has been some work in the past. But the feedback I've had has been in the last few years, the Charities Commission has been working in a way which has been much more positive, closely with charities, and there is a general satisfaction with their work and especially with their autonomy. And you do get to the point, Mr Speaker, of asking the question, if it's not broken, why should we be fixing it? And that appears to be the case with the Charities Commission. The other thing is that they have, over time, built up a good reputation for independence and integrity, and that is something which is very important, and there is always suspicion around a government department that they are more subject to a bit of a nudge from the Minister. Now, I don't even know who the current Minister of Internal Affairs is. Someone enlighten me? Is it Tremaine? Chris Tremaine is well, I mean, I'm sure he would act in a totally proper way and wouldn't ever try and influence. But if, for example, Murray McCully was a minister, could anyone believe that he wouldn't be giving a nudge, elbow or a kick to the Department of Internal Affairs? No, now there he goes again, the poor man's Paul Quinn, interjecting again. Lee Jamie Ross, interjecting yet again. He can never ever get anything right, Mr Speaker. But let's work back to the report of the committee, where the committee did make it clear that many of the members were convinced that the legislative safeguards in the bill were not sufficient to maintain the degree of integrity and independence that the current Charities Commission provides. We think that the charities-related functions will be much less accessible to the public, and the charity sector work will be carried out in a much less transparent manner if these functions just become another part of the grab bag that is the Department of Internal Affairs. And I think, as many of us know, it's sort of the MOBI, whatever that stands for, is whatever Stephen Joyce wants to have within a department, and the Department of Internal Affairs is what no one wants to have in their department, and it goes to the Department of Internal Affairs, and there's therefore a certain lack of support there. So, as I say, Mr. Speaker, on balance, and it was a very fine thing, the Labour Party caucus spent much time deliberating as to whether or not we should support the bill. We decided at the second reading we will, probably as a result of the good work of the Deputy Chair of the Select Committee, the former member for the West Coast. Mr. Speaker, he's convinced us that it's worth going to committee stage, and I do want to signal that it may be on the table of the House now, and if it's not, it will be on the table of the House later in the day. I have tabled an amendment which would put a 3-year gap after the Order in Council bringing the Act into effect until the Charities Commission, in fact, wound up occurred and the transfer occurred. So what that would do would be to provide a window for the review, which is required in legislation, to happen, and for the government to make a decision as to whether or not it wanted to proceed with what we think is ill thought through legislation. Notwithstanding that, we'll be voting against Part 3, and we'll make decisions at the end after that process as to our vote on the third reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member